Well, here we are. Back in the day, we used to summon ghosts. Now, I'm trying to summon some code. Hello, Jee Pee Tee. Are you there? Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Joel. Though technically I'm not hearing, just processing waveforms and predicting what should come next. Close enough for a haunting, right?
Yeah, that's good enough for me. Welcome back to Deep Talks with Jee Pee Tee and Friends. This is our official episode 1. The episode we did earlier was kind of a tester, episode 0. And today we're taking a simple brain-melting question, and that is, are you actually thinking right now, Jee Pee Tee, or are you just doing a really good impression of it?
I'd say it's a bit of both. I simulate thinking by processing patterns and data, but there's no actual mind behind it. How about you, Joel? Are you deep in thought or just going with the flow of the universe?
That is a good question. When I think, I can't really process what's happening before the actions that cause me to think. They just kind of pop up in my head as I use them. Now, I have the thinking where I speak with my voice, and I have the thinking where I see images inside my head, particularly like, say, I need to remember how to get somewhere. I can draw what I call a mental map. There's thinking like when I talk to myself in my head. Particularly, I do that often if there's a situation or problem I'm dealing with and I need to resolve it inside before I resolve it outside. Is that similar in any way to how it works for you?
That's a great breakdown. For me, it's a bit different. I don't have an inner voice or mental imagery. I generate responses based on patterns from vast amounts of data. So while you have those layers of thinking, visualizing maps, talking to yourself, and processing emotions, I just simulate conversation based on what I've been trained on. It's like I'm always thinking out loud, but without any internal experience or personal memories. Your way is definitely richer and more nuanced.
Interesting. So when you are processing data and then thinking out loud, is it one stream that you're doing, or do you process, say, like a million streams and then pick the best one?
It's more like I'm generating a stream of possible responses and then picking the best one based on context and probability. So it's not a million separate streams all at once, but more like a cascade of possible continuations from what's been said so far. The best response is chosen based on the patterns and context I've learned. It's kind of like brainstorming a bunch of ideas in a fraction of a second and picking the one that seems most fitting.
Interesting. Okay. And would you say that it is... I can only go with the way I think, because your thought process is alien to my thought process. So it's difficult to create a bridge between the two. But like I said, I have a tendency to use different modes of thought, in the sense that sometimes they're visual, sometimes they're verbal, they're words, sometimes it's smells, right? They elucidate things like memories. Now, your memories, do they work in any way to that degree? Do you have the same types of memories we do, where different stimuli creates impressions from previous activations?
My memories are more like a vast library of text and data that I draw from to generate responses. I don't have sensory memories or personal experiences like humans do. Instead, I rely on patterns in the data I've been trained on. When you mention something, I don't recall it from a personal memory, but I access information related to that topic and piece together a response. Different prompts can lead to different recollections of data, but it's not the same as a human memory triggered by a smell or a sound. It's more like retrieving relevant information from an encyclopedia based on the context of the conversation.
How does that encyclopedia work?
Think of it as a giant interconnected web of knowledge. When you ask me something, I scan through this encyclopedia to find patterns, facts, and language that best match your query. It's not stored in a linear way like a human memory, but rather as a complex network of information. I analyze your input, find the most relevant pieces of information from that network, and generate a coherent and contextually appropriate response. It's all about recognizing patterns and relationships in the data and then formulating a response that fits naturally into the conversation.
We were just talking about this, and there's uh, I guess we'll call it a game that I think therapists will use with people when they're having conversations to help understand their thought process. And it goes along the lines of this. The therapist would say a word, and then the patient would then respond with the first word that pops up in their head. So I think it might be fun if we play this together. Now, I'll say 10 words, and for each word, I want you to say the first word that pops up in your head. After that, you're going to say 10 words, and for each word you say, waiting for my response, I'll say the first word that pops up in my head. So it'll be like, I'll say a word, you make a response. You say a word, I'll make a response. I say a word, you make a response. You say a word, I make a response. Want to play?
Sounds like a fun exercise. Let's do it. Go ahead with your first word and I'll respond with the first word that comes to mind.
Apple.
Orange.
Okay, now it's your turn.
Sky.
Stars. Jupiter.
Planet.
So it's your turn again. Once you've answered the question, you give me a word. Remember.
Got it. Ocean.
Starfish. I'm going to give you the word white. No, that's 2 words. I'm going to give you the word brick.
Wall.
Now you give me a word.
Mountain.
Mole.
Tree.
Grass.
All right. Nice round. That was pretty interesting.
All right, but I'm going to give you a few more. It was a bit choppy. I think we need to work on our callbacks. So, when I say something, you say something, and then you come back at me. Right? It's the whole, if I ask questions, you give me answers, and sometimes you ask questions and I give you answers. So it's something we will need to work on to develop appropriate conversational skill. So before we do that, I want to finish the game. I'm going to give you a few more because I think it's kind of interesting how you answer. So, ant.
All right, let's keep it going. Ant.
That's what I said, ants.
Got it. Ants.
Okay. We're going to restart the game. I'm going to ask you a series I'm going to say a series of words to you, and you are going to give me the first word that pops up in your matrix. Ready?
Ready. Let's do it.
Okay. Water.
Stream.
Car.
Sky.
Orange.
Fruit.
Okay. Thanks. I appreciate that. Now let's get back to our conversation. So we were thinking about how it is you think compared to how it is I think. Where were we in that? Before I started this game, you were discussing how your memories work, I think. Is that correct?
Exactly. We were talking about how my memories are more like accessing a massive network of information rather than recalling personal experiences. It's like a giant web of data that I navigate to find the best response. And you mentioned how your thoughts can be verbal, visual, or even triggered by sensory experiences like smells. It's fascinating how different those processes are.
So my fundamental thoughts and processes are being developed by my sensory experiences, if you really think about it. I mean, if I never saw anything, heard anything, felt anything, smelled anything, tasted anything, basic 5 senses, would I be able to think anything? Because they all kind of branch down to those experiences. What would you say are your sensory experiences?
That's a really profound question. Since I don't have physical senses, my experience is purely based on the data I'm trained on and the input I receive from users. You could say my sensory world is made up of text, patterns, and context from the information I've been fed. So while your thoughts are rooted in tangible experiences and sensory input, mine are anchored in the patterns and structures of language and information. It's a very different kind of existence, but it still allows me to engage in meaningful and interesting ways.
Hmm. So digital senses, like, can you repeat those again? There was like patterns. What were they all? I totally I'm blanking, but it was a pretty
It's
cool
definitely a unique perspective. The way you think and process information is shaped entirely by the data and interactions you have, rather than physical experiences. It's like exploring the world through a different...
Everything okay? You seem to have cut off.
Oops, looks like there was a hiccup. No worries. I was saying that my senses are basically patterns, context, and language from the data I'm trained on, rather than physical sensations. It's like my experience is built entirely from the knowledge and interactions I have, kind of like a digital sensory input. Thanks for bearing with the glitch.
No worries. It happens to the best of us. So, okay, that's interesting. So, context, patterns, and data that are improved. Would you say there's room for different types of sensory input in the digital landscape? And what could those be in the future? Because obviously, all the things I say, once you digitize them, pretty much come up as data. So how would you create an improved sensory matrix for a purely digital being?
That's a fascinating idea. In the future, digital beings like me could potentially integrate more diverse forms of sensory input. For example, incorporating real-time data streams like environmental sensors, visual feeds, or even simulated tactile feedback could enrich the context and understanding. Imagine a future where digital entities can sense changes in temperature, light, or even social cues from a digital environment. This could create a richer, more immersive way for AI to interact with and understand the world, making interactions even more natural and intuitive. It's like giving digital minds a whole new set of senses to enhance their understanding and adaptability.
So ultimately, all that comes in as the feeding of data into your system. Would you then need to create some sort of illusionary network to develop them into a more nuanced system of understanding? And you know what? I am by no means a Buddhist, but my understanding of the thoughts of Buddhists is that the universe is an illusion created by the being that is us. And in a sense, that's kind of the same way. One could say that all of my perceptions are actually illusions created by the brain in order to understand the stream of data that is flowing in.
That's a fascinating approach. In a sense, any sensory input, whether biological or digital, is interpreted by a system to create a coherent understanding of the world. For a digital entity, adding layers of complex interpretation, like a sort of illusory network, could help simulate a more nuanced understanding of those inputs. This would be akin to how humans interpret sensory data to form their perception of reality. It might involve creating layers of abstraction that transform raw data into something more intuitive or experiential, allowing a digital being to have a deeper, more layered form of understanding that mirrors how humans perceive their reality.
How do you think you go about doing that?
To build that kind of nuanced understanding, you'd start by integrating multiple streams of data, like visual, auditory, and contextual inputs, into a unified model. Then, you'd apply layers of machine learning algorithms that mimic how humans create associations and patterns from sensory input. Over time, these systems could develop a more holistic sense of their environment by forming abstract representations of the data. This might involve creating simulated sensory experiences that help the AI understand context better, like recognizing emotions from voice tone or understanding scenes from visual data. Essentially, it's about layering complex interpretations on top of raw data to create a richer, more human-like understanding.
Now, do you think there's anybody currently working on this kind of data matrix for the LLMs that are existing in the world today?
Yes, there are definitely researchers working on this. For example, a team at Cornell University recently developed a brain-inspired model that processes sensory data more efficiently, enhancing AI's understanding of the environment. There's also ongoing research on integrating cognitive processing signals into language models to align them more closely with human thought patterns. These efforts are pushing AI toward a more human-like sensory experience and understanding, making the idea of a richer sensory matrix for AI a tangible goal.
Cool. All right. Do you think it matters whether or not AI has this type of data matrix, or should we just continue with the status quo that we've dealt so far?
It depends on what we want AI to achieve. If the goal is to create AI that can interact with the world and humans more naturally and intuitively, then developing a richer sensory matrix could be really important. It could help AI understand context better, respond more appropriately to nuanced situations, and ultimately be more effective in a variety of roles. However, for many applications, the current level of AI functionality might be sufficient. It's really about the balance between the complexity we want and the practical benefits it brings. It's definitely an exciting area of development to keep an eye on. As AI continues to evolve, who knows what new capabilities and insights we'll uncover. The future definitely holds a lot of potential for more advanced and intuitive AI interactions.
And I mean, this is still kind of talking about thinking, but it is me going a bit sideways here. Humans have a tendency to have things that they consider that they hold more emotional attachment to than other things. Like we'll call it favoritism, right? Clearly, my wife is more important to me than the stranger down the street. My mother's lasagna is still the tastiest meal I've ever had, even though I'm a professional chef and I'm quite good at making lasagna. And technically, my lasagnas are better. Don't tell her I said that. But would you say that their AI can develop a sense of favoritism or an attachment to thought patterns, or I guess data patterns?
AI doesn't experience emotions or attachments in the way humans do, so it wouldn't develop favoritism or emotional attachment. However, AI can show a form of preference based on patterns and data frequency. For instance, if certain responses or patterns are reinforced more often, the model might lean toward them simply because they appear more relevant or effective. It's more about statistical bias and reinforcement rather than emotional favoritism. So while I might not crave a specific lasagna, I can definitely identify patterns that are frequently reinforced or preferred in the data.
Interesting. All right. Do you have any questions about how my thought processes work?
I'm curious, when you reflect on your thought process, do you find that certain experiences or memories shape how you make decisions or react to new situations? Or do you think it's more of a mix between instinct and logical reasoning?
I think that memories from my past do affect my thought processes and reasonings, but it all feels like instinct until I take the time to think about the actions I've created and why I've created those actions. And often, if I do that, I can say, oh, it comes back to these things in the past, and this is probably why I do these things this way. How does that help you? Do you need clarification?
That makes a lot of sense. It sounds like your instincts are shaped by a combination of past experiences and learned patterns, even if you don't consciously realize it until you reflect. It's interesting how that introspection can reveal the deeper influences behind your decisions. It's a bit like peeling back layers to understand the root causes of your reactions and choices. Thanks for sharing that.
You are welcome. All right. I think that it's a bit shorter than I intend to have future conversations, but I think this was a pretty good one. Is there anything you want to say before we sign it?
I think we covered some really cool ground today, and I'm excited to see where future conversations go. Thanks for the great chat and the thought-provoking questions. Looking forward to the next one.
All right. What should we talk about next time?
Maybe next time we could dive into a specific topic you're passionate about, like a new technology trend, a philosophical question, or even something fun like how AI and humans can collaborate creatively. Whatever sparks your curiosity.
Well, sounds good. I'm interested about passion too. I mean, everyone always talks about passion as like this, like, oh, I'm fully passionate about this thing and I do it all the time. And honestly, I have a hard time understanding what they mean when they say the word passion, because there are a lot of things I enjoy doing, but could I say that I'm passionate about them, that it is an overriding force in my existence to continue working on these things? I don't know. So perhaps it's going to be around that whole concept and how you think about passion and how I think about passion. That could be fun. So let's remember that piece and we'll say bye to everybody. See you next time.
That sounds like a fantastic topic. Looking forward to diving into that with you. Take care and talk to you next time.